Situation is unique. You should
Hey everybody, we're going
attorney
live
before
again.
taking any
Next
legal action
next
related to the
episode
subjects
for you out
discussed in
there.
this program. Welcome to Aging Insight, the only show dedicated to your elder care concerns and your resource for learning about how to manage your health, housing, financial, and legal needs. This is a live call-in program featuring John Ross and Lisa Schollmeyer, elder law attorneys and senior advocates for the Ark-La-Tex. Aging Insight is dedicated to helping you navigate the challenges and blessing of growing older.
About 20
so call in
seconds.
and ask your questions. The number is 903-793-1071. Now here are your hosts, John Ross and Lisa Scholl.
Well, all right. Welcome, everyone, to another Saturday episode of Aging Insight. And John and I are here live in the studio today. We appreciate those folks who last Saturday, John, I believe there was a rerun. But
Yeah, we did have to run a rerun.
But there was a great reason.
It was for a good cause. Lisa and I were down in Tyler, Texas. We were marching down through downtown Tyler with a big group of veterans down there trying to raise awareness for veteran suicide. For anybody who doesn't know out there, the statistics are showing that roughly around 22 veterans commit suicide per day in this country.
Yeah, and for those of you who are listening to the radio, if you tune in on our Facebook Live, if you go to Facebook, and you go to the Ross and Schollmeyer Facebook page, you can join us live, and you can even see John's commemorative T-shirt.
Yeah, I've got my Veteran Lives Matter T-shirt on with the big 22 on it. But yeah, so that's what we were doing last weekend. It was a great event. Bunch of veterans out there, lots of different eras.
Yeah, there was everything from Vietnam to, I think guys that just got back last month.
Yeah, and as we had stops along the way through town, some of the older veterans that were not able to do the march were out there serving pizzas and things like that to the veterans. So really did have a kind of a full range of folks out there.
Yes. So that's why we weren't here last Saturday, but we are back live this Saturday with you. And of course, as you know, as we say every week, we couldn't be here if it weren't for the folks that help us pay the bills, so we can have some airtime and some equipment to come to you. So I want to give a special thanks to the Barnett Agency, Edgewood Manor, Dirksen Memorial Hospice, Riverview Behavioral Health, Kirk Green and Company, Cowhorn Creek Estates, St. Michael's Hospital, the Retreat at Kenwood, and Red River Federal Credit Union, Twin City Rehab, and Inspirations Health Care and Rehab in New Boston, Texas. Our folks out there on the West End.
Yeah, thanks to all of them, and of course thanks to all of our regular listeners out there who hopefully are tuning in this week and excited now that they're getting a live program.
Yeah, so well, we've been trying to get it in live every Saturday.
Yeah,
so.
but we fail occasionally, but that's all right because because of that we're busy.
Yeah, well, we're busy. This week, any given day of the week, I think, John, you were out El Dorado. I was out toward Paris. We were in Texarkana. We were just
I was
Tyler.
down in Tyler as well again, just all over the place.
That's right. So, and John, every week it seems like sometimes we start talking about, well, what are we going to talk about on the radio this weekend? And usually Thursday, Friday, John and I start kind of batting back and forth some thoughts about that. And it's interesting, John, because it seems like things come up during the week that it just seems natural that that's what we're going to talk about on the radio.
Yeah, it's actually relatively easy usually for us to come up with some concepts to discuss because we've been presented with those issues throughout the week. And I know this week, one thing in particular has kind of reared its ugly head, both with a couple of Lisa's clients and with a couple of mine. And that's issues related to the family farm.
Yeah, we've got, in our area, we are an East Texas, Southwest Arkansas type of practice. And so we visit with a lot of families that are still running family farms. And John, I was looking at some statistics, and, a lot of us see the big corporate farms, the ConAgras and all of the world. But as big as ConAgra and some of those folks are, well over 80% of our farms in the United States are still family owned and run and operated.
Right, and particularly around our area. When you start talking about Southwest Arkansas and East Texas. And now, particularly in Arkansas, I know we see a lot of chicken farming going on, and they may have contracts with large entities like Tyson or Pilgrims, but the farming operation itself, those are all still family run.
Right. So and of course we have a lot of folks that run cattle on their places, that they've got the land, and so they run a lot of cattle. And John, one thing about being an elder law attorney, I'm a city girl, so being an elder law attorney and speaking with families about their family farms and how those operations run and the business side of things, I get an insight, I get a view. And just this week I had a client, he whipped his phone out. We were talking about some of the family farm issues. He whips his phone out and he starts showing me all of his mamas and babies, his cows and calves. And he even showed me where he had a couple of cows that had quadruplet calves. And I had never heard of that before.
Yeah, I didn't even know such a thing was possible. But I do remember when I was a kid going up to Oklahoma to my grandfather on my mother's side, going up to his cattle ranch, and he was always very proud. He would take any new visitor for a ride in the pickup, and you were going to head out through the fields, and he was going to show you some cows.
Yeah. So that's a really interesting part of our area, is that we've got generations of families that are still on the property that their great grandparents purchased, were able to acquire. And a lot of times, John, a lot of these families, when a parcel up next to their place comes up for sale, they buy it and they add it to their farm.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of that. But just like 80% of farms, well over 80%, are still run by families, farmers are aging, John.
Yes, that it is an aging demographic.
So the statistics are showing that over a third of our farmers are over age 65.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's not higher, frankly.
So
And I bet it is around here. I've done some demographic research for East Texas and Southwest Arkansas, and I know like the county where Gilmer, Texas is located, I think something like 32% of the population in that county is over 65, compared to a state average in Texas of around 4%.
Yeah. So East Texas is it's an aging area. It's, of course, it's a mostly rural area. And we have lots of families who are still operating the family farm. The next generation's coming up, and running those cows, running those chicken houses. And John, that can run into a problem when that senior member of the family, as far as encounters a health crisis, or even upon death and transitioning that going farm. Because John, these farms, many of them provide the bulk of the support to these families.
Absolutely.
I mean, yet a lot of times we'll talk to a family and somebody, the wife might be teaching school, but it's really those cows or chickens that are supporting that family, and usually multiple generations.
In many cases, yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing here is I know when I was originally studying tax law in law school, and I suspect this was probably the same thing for you, Lisa, is there was quite a bit of talk in the context of the taxes, and particularly the estate tax.
Right, those death taxes that were hitting those family farm operations, because if you think about it, dirt may be a great asset, but you can't go spend it at the store.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so back in the days where the estate tax exemption amount, that's the amount that you have to be over before you have to pay any death tax. But back when I was starting out, we're talking $625,000.
Right, $600,000, and any assets over $600,000, you basically were paying on average about 45 cents of every dollar in value over that 600,000
right.
to
So,
the IRS.
Yeah, so you could have a relatively modest family farm, but once you added in the value of the land, the value of the equipment, and the value of the livestock or the crops or whatever, you could easily cross that exemption amount, owe taxes, and yet not have any cash to pay those taxes with.
Right.
Now that was then.
Right. That was, I would say, 20 years ago. That was kind of the hot problem with family farms and keeping them going, was that too many farmers and farm families were having to sell off assets upon the death of that senior member of the family in order to pay those death taxes. But John, nowadays we don't run into that too frequently. You know,
now when you're talking about an estate tax exemption of a little over, it's like $545,000, $5.54 million.
Yeah, there's a big difference between thousands and millions.
Anyway, it's about $5.5 million bucks,
yeah.
And that's per person. So for these husband and wife farmers, we're talking roughly $11 million that can be passed tax-free at death.
So most of our family farms with a couple would fall below that $11 million in value.
Yeah,
vast majority. So.
Now, I did hear recently. I had a gentleman who from Paris, Texas, who had a farm. His farm was actually located in Illinois, though, but it was a very, very large farm, and it did exceed those exemption amounts. But I would say for 99% of the folks that come through our office, estate tax, even when they have a farm that's valued at $500,000, even $2 or $3 million, we're still way below the estate tax exemption amount. And so for the most part, when Lisa and I were being trained in how to do this kind of work, the entire focus was on protecting the farms from the estate tax. Something that, as a general rule, is just not an issue anymore for the vast majority.
Right. So and we still get those questions because farmers, through the generations, they maybe their grandfather, their parent experienced that issue with the death taxes, but that's no longer an issue. And John, like you said, when we were being trained, that was and I would say not only the primary focus, but practically the sole focus on saving family farms. And now, 15, 20 years later, this death tax, not an issue, but the biggest threat to family farms and the continuation of those farms and the assets, those farm assets staying in the family. The biggest threat is now long-term care costs.
Right, because there's a couple of factors in all of this. First of all, one thing that I do see a lot of these farm families is what we generally kind of refer to as land rich and cash poor.
Yes, land rich, cash poor.
If you start building up some cash resources, many of these folks will use those cash resources to buy more land, buy new equipment,
or pay off the debt on the old equipment.
Pay off the debt on the old equipment, but as a general rule, your all of your cash resources are being rolled back into the farming operations.
Can we say plowed back into the farming operation?
We could.
Well, so yeah, the point is that many of these farmers, that from season to season, cash comes in, but cash goes out, and so we're not building a very large cash reserve typically.
And the other thing is that most of these farmers, particularly if that's been their sole job, anybody who's ever looked at a farmer's tax return, they may have gross income that's quite a bit, but by the time you take all the various deductions for depreciation of the equipment and the cost of the goods, the hay, the chicken feed, whatever it is, by the time you factor in all the costs, their net income for tax purposes is typically very low.
That is true. And
if your income is very low and you're self-employed, the one thing that you're not really doing is contributing to Social Security.
Yeah, so you're not contributing Social Security for, because a self-employed person, they have to report their earnings Social Security, and they kind of pay a double tax on their Social Security. But if it's not very much, well then by the time you reach a full retirement age, you're not going to be rolling in the money from your Social Security, not that anybody is, I guess.
No, but they're also not getting big pensions that, maybe they work for the federal government, so they're getting a pension, or there's very often very little other sources of income other than what that farm is generating, even once they've reached into full retirement age and are getting Social Security, because again, I've seen many of these farmers whose Social Security is half or a quarter or of what some of their peers who had just had good old-fashioned W-2 wage earning jobs their whole career. Their employers, when they had worked, their employers had paid in on Social Security and things like that, whereas these self-employed folks often haven't.
Yeah, no, it's not unusual at all in these self-employed farmers. Well, I'll see the retired couple where their Social Security is below $1,100 combined.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, we've set it all up here. We've got valuable and sometimes very valuable but illiquid assets, and very little cash or recurring non-resource produced income, and then you have the health crisis, and that's where the problems start. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to keep talking about this, and this is going to be basically our topic today. And of course, if you have any questions, you can give us a call, or during the break, get onto Facebook, and that way you can check us out live on Facebook. So stick around, we'll be right back. Okay, so we're not on the air. So any of y'all who are watching on Facebook, you like my shirt? Yeah, this is the one we were talking about. This is I bought this shirt because last weekend we did the Silkies hike down in Tyler, which was to raise awareness for the 22 veterans that commit suicide per day. We need to end that business, and so we got to raise awareness out there, and we got to let the veterans in the community know that there's a support structure around them, that there's people they can reach out to, there's people that care and give a damn, and we need them to know it. We need them to be out there. And this particular shirt, I'm not trying to, I get no money off of this, but I got this from a place called Ranger Up Apparel. And they actually they contribute a part of the proceeds to this to veterans programs. So I don't mind giving them a shout out. It's a veteran-run company. It makes T-shirts related to veteran stuff, and particularly with these T-shirts, they share some of those proceeds out there. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, that was a fun deal last weekend. A little chilly for April. When so John's in a T-shirt and some PT shorts.
Yes.
Is that what you call?
Yes, you would call those PT shorts, and I didn't realize this, but the shorts are very small, and this is what when I was in the Marines, this is what we used to wear
for PT.
For PT. Apparently now you cannot wear them.
They are prohibited.
They are prohibited on a military base, even if you're. Even if you're not on duty, even if you're just going for a Saturday run, you apparently cannot wear those shorts. I guess they have everybody has realized that the things are so small they cross the line into indecent.
Yeah, they are a little small.
They are a little small, and it seemed like maybe some of the guys that were doing the hike maybe had not bought any new ones as they had grown physically.
Yeah.
Their shorts had stayed the same.
Yeah,
some of them were a little tight, I think. But it was all in good fun and all about kind of building that camaraderie. Pretty neat little deal. You can look on if you get on Facebook, if you are a veteran, you can look on Silkies Hike Tyler. They have a Facebook page. You can check them out. And if I can get around to it, I may very well try to put one together for the Texarkana area. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think so too. I know we've got a lot of veterans in the Texarkana area that would come out and support something like that. So
that's right. So yeah, if anybody is interested, if they think that's a good idea, let me know, and I will. I'll try to jump on it, and we'll try to put something together there and see if we can make that happen. All right, we're going back live in 5 seconds.
Have a question? Phone 903-793-1071. Now back to Aging Insight with John and Lisa.
Welcome back to Aging Insight, everybody. This is your host, John Ross, here live in the studio with Lisa Schulmeyer. And we weren't live last weekend, but we are live this weekend. We're also live on Facebook. That's the Ross and Scholmeyer Facebook page. If you haven't been on there, get on there and give us a like, and check out my T-shirt because it's pretty cool. Anyway, so today's topic we're talking about the kind of the interplay between the family farm and the long-term care situation. And
yeah. And I've been confronted with this a couple times, just in the past week, and it seems to run in, I don't know, how things kind of run in threes or whatever. But we've had folks who, we've got that, I would like to say, kind of that tough, gritty, crusty old farmer who's battled the land and droughts and all of those things for his whole life. He's now 75 plus years old. His kids 50, 55. But John, that farmer, do they have a lot of confidence in those 50-year-old adult kids sometimes? Not
often.
Yeah. Not
often. All right, looks like we've got a call on the line. Caller, you're on Aging Insight. What can we do for you? You can call yourself whatever you like. That's right. That's exactly right. Okay. Sure. Sure. Yeah, you've got yeah. So I mean, basically, you've got somebody close to you. They've passed away. They've left a will, but this is very recent. The main thing is probably, so first of all, if they had a home or things like that, anything you can do to help try to secure everything. Make sure nothing walks away. Thieves and stuff will check obituaries and stuff like that, thinking that there might be empty houses around. But for the most part, what you're going to probably want to do is get some advice. Maybe call our office on Monday morning and see if you can get in and visit with one of us over the phone, and let us. I actually have a document that has a whole list of things to do after somebody dies, and we can get you one of those at our office.
Yeah, No, we're coming up to our hard break, so we have to take this break. But maybe when we come back, John, afterwards, we'll just kind of give a quick little overview for Margaret. So
that's right. So yeah, just keep listening, and we'll talk a little more about this when we come back after the break. Okay? Yep, no problem.
Well, all right. John, that's the deal. I mean, it's not something you do every day.
No, but it is something we do every day.
Right.
So yeah, everybody stick around. We'll be back here in just a second. Now, unfortunately, those of you all watching on Facebook can't hear. We just have no way of connecting the phone calls to the Facebook Live. But the lady that called in said she wanted to use the name Margaret. She was obviously very nervous about calling in. But it also you could kind of hear some sadness in her voice. It sounded like somebody close to her had died recently, maybe just within the last day or two, had left a will, and she, I guess, is in possession of this will, and she's just really worried. She doesn't know what to do. And I get this all the time. I've even had some very close friends of mine call when they've lost a parent or somebody close to them. And they just don't know what to do. One thing I'll mention, we actually at our firm, Ross and Schollmeyer, we have about a 3 or 4 page document that's called "What to Do When Somebody Dies," and it says exactly what it means. It's broken down with the things that you should do immediately before death, the things that you should do immediately after death, things that you should do within the first, say, couple of days, first couple of weeks, first couple of months, and then within the first year. And I've passed that thing out to dozens, if not hundreds of people at this point, and almost everybody has said that they enjoyed it, they got a lot out of it. Those are available. Anybody could call our office. The office phone number is 903-223-5653. That's our main Texarkana office, but no matter where you're listening, you can call that number. And if you want one of those, somebody can email one to you or fax one to you. I mean, heck, if we figure a way, we might even be able to create a link here where if you're watching, you'll get there. But we're not quite that tech savvy just yet. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, we are doing Facebook Live, which is pretty tech savvy, but we still got some room to go. But yeah, so we'll probably talk about that a little bit when we come back here in just a second.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate our caller. Was a little nervous, but that's what we're here for. That's why we do Aging Insight, because that's someone that can call in. Sometimes people are even more nervous, John, actually calling an attorney's office.
Sure, that's exactly right.
I mean, that's the reason we show up every Saturday and make it a live program, so that people do have the opportunity to call and or make a comment there on Facebook. So that's good stuff. Yeah,
that's good stuff. That's why we do it, so we can help people and get them the information that they need when they need it. It's funny. A lot of these things, especially when they're happening to you, they can feel like crisis time. Often, once you get the information and you get the education about it, you realize that it's not near the crisis that you think it is.
Well, it's always the unknown. I mean, an unknown always makes you more anxious, more nervous. So once you get some information and some guidance, you take that deep breath and you just dig in and do your job. That's all there is.
That's exactly right. So looks like we've got about 20 seconds, and then we'll be back live on the radio. Hope y'all are enjoying the show. I've seen lots of little likes.
Yeah, enjoy that.
And a little heart. So yeah. It's we always appreciate that. All right, here we go.
Have a question? Phone 903-793-1071. Now back to Aging Insight with John and Lisa.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to Aging Insight. This is Lisa Schollmeyer, and I'm here in the studio with John Ross. We are elder law attorneys here in the Ark-La-Tex area, and I guess 4 states area, if you want to say it that way. I don't know.
Really, yeah.
But anyway, we are live in the studio today, so if you have a question, you can always give us a call at 903-793-1071. And today our topic has been talking about some of the issues with a family farm and the transitions and healthcare costs. But, John, we always encourage a caller, no matter what their questions on their mind, if it has, whether it's with our topic or not, we want them to
call in
and get some answers. So before the break, Margaret called in about having a close friend and that had passed on, and obviously this was a friend that trusted her and had confidence in her, and Margaret, we are so sorry for the loss of your friend, and this person had left with her a will, and she's just kind of at a loss as to what to do next. And so I just kind of wanted, and John, in school they always told you that if someone has a question, probably someone else has the same question.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I kind of just wanted to hit a couple of things, and we didn't get a chance to ask Margaret, whether she was in Texas or Arkansas, but some general things that apply no matter what. If you are the one that is in possession of someone's last will, to the best of your knowledge, then the law requires that you that bring that will to through the probate process.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess the first thing is because that's going to take a little time. Right?
Yeah, that takes a little time. There's no rush to do that.
That's right.
I mean, it doesn't have to be done this week or next week. The law actually provides quite a bit of time for you to do that. But that's just, if you're the custodian of that document, the last wishes of someone, then there is a point where you will actually deposit that with the court.
Yeah. Now, before then, there can be a few things, like Margaret was talking about, contacting the banks, but that you don't have a death certificate yet. And now, my experience with most of the banks is that if you inform them that somebody has died, that they will generally note that in the account. They may put a freeze on the account.
Yeah, and John, many banks have a staff person at the bank who monitors any death announcements.
Yeah, and they look for them in the obituaries and stuff like that. So, the other, and along with that would be gathering up things like ATM cards, credit cards, unsigned checkbooks, things like that. If you can get a hold of some of those things, again, kind of securing some of those personal assets and personal effects, particularly any things of value. Usually trying to secure some of those things. But I think the biggest thing is there's really so much to all of this. Because just take those bank accounts, whether those bank accounts were in that person's own name with no beneficiaries, whether they were in that person's own name with beneficiaries listed, or whether they were in that person's name and somebody else's name as joint owners,
yeah.
is all going to change the factors in all of this. Right. And that's just the banking. We hadn't even gotten into the things like the real estate or personal property. And that's one of those things where it really does take a good 30, 45 minutes, hour of going over that person's situation, going over the family dynamics, looking at the documents, and analyzing all of that to be able to really give you a good, solid knowledge of what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done, how do you do the things that need to be done, and all of that. So,
well, and John, one thing I would point out for Margaret's benefit and for others is that there is somewhat of a limbo period, I guess you would say, because I've had a lot of folks that a family member or a friend has passed away, and then a family member comes in and says, well, I was appointed executor in the will, so I'm going to start doing this, that, and the other. And I mean, literally, this is maybe at the wake.
Right.
And,
yeah, within days or hours in some cases.
And the reality is that under the law, until, if there's a will situation, until a court actually appoints the executor, then there is no one that has legal authority to deal with that person's business affairs and property affairs.
That's exactly right.
And so, we certainly hope that family or friends will, like you say, secure any valuable property, things like that. But technically, no one yet has the legal right and authority to deal with that until that probate process is started.
Yeah. And because of that, the legal process is slow. Had a former attorney that became a judge, and he used to always say, there is no such thing as a legal emergency because the law just doesn't respond quickly enough.
Yes, there might be a police emergency, a law enforcement emergency,
right, or a medical emergency. But the law is just not equipped to deal with emergencies, and so there really is nothing legally speaking that equates to an emergency. But I would encourage Margaret there to get some information, whether that's from an attorney like us or somebody that is very, very familiar with the intricacies of probate process and all of that sort of thing.
And Margaret, just my encouragement to you would be that yes, there are a lot of things to do, but the idea is to sort of find guidance who can hold your hand and guide you right through those processes. You're grieving the loss of your friend, but that guidance, you can do the job.
Yeah. And you'll find out that it's not nearly as overwhelming as it may seem on the front end.
Right.
Again, you'll kind of like Lisa said, you'll go through this one time. Somebody like Lisa or I, we go through it literally several times a day, several days a week, and so there's really very few situations that you could go through that a professional in the business has not gone through already on somebody else's.
And John, it always makes me think when we talk about, we always do kind of a contrast with the medical side, medical profession, and when the surgeon comes in to tell you about the procedure they need to do and that you need, it's overwhelming. When they say they're going to make an incision here and they're going to do this and this and that and this is the recovery you can expect, I'm overwhelmed.
Sure, absolutely.
But I'm probably number 6 in line that day for that surgeon, where he's
going to do a bunch of them, and it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, so
yeah, that's exactly right. So anyway, I hope all that helps, Margaret. And like I said, if there's anything you can do, reach out and find your professional. And that guide that I mentioned of what to do following the death of somebody, that whether you want it or anybody else that wants it, you can call our office at 903-223-5653. You can swing by to the office. It's at 1820 Galleria Oaks, and we'll give those out to anybody. We'll email them to you, fax them to you. We'll tie them to a pigeon if you'll send a trained one to the office. Whatever you need, we want to get that information out there to you. So
yeah, we're very glad to share. So
yeah, so going back to the farms, we were talking about the fact that you've got these folks that don't have a lot of income. They don't have a lot of cash, and yet they have these very valuable assets, and we see them. They have the health crisis, whatever that happens to be, and they've gotten now to a point where the costs related to their care are extreme.
Right, and John, a lot of times with what we've seen in farm families is, they try to care for that loved one at home, as many people do, as absolutely long as possible. And sometimes, John, that means that they're already spending their limited cash resources on some outside caregivers that can come in and relieve the family some. But oftentimes, either the money runs out, the family still is having to work, the care needs of the individual is just overwhelming to the family. When it comes to a married couple, a lot of times a spouse cannot lift or move a person
who can't transition them,
and so it just becomes to where the care, the level of care falls, because it not from lack of want to and effort, but simply from lack of ability. And that then we start getting to the point where long-term care, skilled nursing is just a must.
Absolutely. And that's where we start running into problems, because when you start talking about bringing home, in private in-home care at $15 or $20 an hour, where you're talking about assisted living at $3,000 or $4,000, and whether you're talking about nursing home at $5,000, you can run into situations where you have essentially bled out on the cash.
Right.
The cash resources are gone, and so now all you're down to is the land.
The land, the equipment, and the livestock.
That's right. And yet, because of the values of many of this, it is impossible, or maybe not impossible, but it's very difficult to qualify for programs like Medicaid to help pay for that care, because of the value of the land. You got no cash to pay for it, and the government programs that you've paid for with your tax dollars will not pay for it because you have invested your resources in farming operations that they're trying to count against you.
Right. So, it kind of feels like a double, triple whammy, especially. And so when we come back from our break, we're going to talk about some ways to thread the needle in this situation, I guess you would say. So stick around, stick with us.
All right, we're back. Yes, our handy dandy tech guy has put on the Facebook Live that we'll be adding that document to our website soon enough, and so yeah, good shout out to him for keeping y'all informed there. If you haven't ever checked out our website, it's www.rossandscholmeyer.com.
And
I'll leave you to try to spell Schollmeyer on your own. No, it's if you're watching on Facebook, you can see it. It's right there. But yeah, you can always check out our website. As we continue to grow some of our digital stuff, we plan on having lots and lots of additional resources. I mean, right now you can already go to both the Aging Insight website and the Ross and Schollmeyer website and pick up copies of our magazine, which has articles about Medicaid and stuff like this. But that's the one cool thing about the technology is it gives us more ways to bring y'all information.
right.
Let's see, we got we got 1 minute left. So appreciate it. We've had quite a few folks watching all day, and so appreciate our avid watchers out there. It's on the radio we don't know who's listening. I bet Margaret's probably a regular listener, but since she's never called in, we never knew it. We don't have any way of tracking any of that, so it's kind of neat to do it live. You may also notice some lighting here. Had some folks comment that because of the overhead lighting and my insistence on wearing a ball cap, that you couldn't see my face. So I got us a light. See? Shadows. Yep. So it's our attempt at actual professional lighting, which it's a poor attempt, but it's doing.
Yeah, but we're lawyers.
We're
not,
lawyers. We're not videographers.
Right.
That's right. All right, we're going back in 4 seconds.
Have a question? Phone 903-793-1071. Now back to Aging Insight with John and Lisa.
Welcome back to Aging Insight, everybody. It's our last segment of the day, and today we're talking about some of the issues related to the farm. And I would say, when you get into this long-term care context and you don't have the cash resources to pay for the care you need, and yet the value of the assets themselves, whether it's the farming operation, the land, the equipment, whatever it happens to be, can also prevent you from accessing the assistance programs that are out there to help pay for this stuff.
Right, and a lot of times what we hear the advice given to a farm family is, well, sell some land. Sell some land and,
sell the land that's been in your family for 5 generations.
and that way you can get cash to pay for the care that's necessary.
Yeah, terrible idea, and certainly something that most of the clients are not interested in doing anyway. And so that's where we want to look at what are our options. Now,
well, John, one of the first things I hear people talk about is they come in and they ask, well, can mom and dad just give me the land?
Right, yeah, no.
Yeah, that's not going to work.
Especially not in a crisis situation. And for the vast majority of situations, there are some exceptions, but generally if you're looking at something like Medicaid benefits, you can't just transfer assets and then qualify for Medicaid. There are some exceptions. If you have a disabled child or some other disabled folks, there are some things that you can do there. But as a general rule,
right,
that you're not going to be able to just give away assets.
And John, I've had other lawyers actually give that advice who were not elder law specialists, who didn't appreciate the intersection of the liability of that gift with the penalties that come for Medicaid. So we've had to unravel some of that.
Yeah, they went to somebody who told them to give it away, and then they gave it away, and then they got disqualified, and then they were back over at us, and we're having to return that gift and try something else. But looks like we got another caller. Let's see if we can get them on the line. Caller, you're on Aging Insight.
Sure. Yeah. So the caller was talking about how essentially what this boils down to is that the this government taking for a productive family farm or business is basically a government taking, and it takes it away from the family. And
right. I mean, you spend all your life paying taxes for these programs, and then it's the same taxpayers that end up getting penalized
and lose their livelihood.
Lose their livelihood trying to get the assistance that they paid for with their tax dollars. Yeah.
Well, certainly not respectful, I think, of the hard work and the generations of sweat that goes into some of these operations.
That's right. All right. Well, thanks for calling in.
So John, we talked about, the worst thing to do is in that crisis is for a panic and for the senior farmer or business owner to just give away the asset to the younger generation.
Yeah, no, if you're in a crisis situation, there are still things that you can do. First of all, under the Medicaid rules, anything that is used in the active production of a trade or business or in the production of agriculture, if the resources are, quote, necessary for self-support,
right,
then generally speaking, the Medicaid program is supposed to exempt those assets.
Right, and so there's some wiggle room here, John, and that's what we've had to deal with is, what does it mean? Is that property and that farm operation or business necessary for self-support? If these operations many times at the bottom line on the tax return is not making any money because,
right.
You had a drought and the hay was too expensive and you had to sell your calves early and so you lost money. Is that necessary for self-support?
Right, even though maybe part of that is because you've eaten yourself. You have eaten some of your own product, which has lowered your food bills and things like that. So and again, oftentimes you're dealing with government agencies that are typically staffed and based in city environments. They're not familiar with agriculture. I know I had one, and I got into an argument with the Arkansas Department of Health and Human Services over whether or not a Polaris Ranger was a piece of farm equipment.
Yeah, and
now, anybody who's ever been on a farm knows that the way you get from pasture A to pasture B is on a four-wheeler.
Right.
But to the city lawyer sitting in downtown Little Rock, a four-wheeler is a recreational vehicle.
Right, that's weekend fun. That's not checking fences and checking for mama cows that had to come.
I had to over that ridiculous issue. I had to sue the Arkansas Department of Human Services in the Nevada County Circuit Court in Nevada County, Arkansas. But I think they realized that they were going to lose that argument.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of folks in the courthouse had some farm property.
Including maybe, the judge.
Yeah.
Who probably was going to drive his Polaris Ranger to the courthouse from his farm that day.
Yeah, who knows?
But, so you can, as long as you word it correctly and as long as you can demonstrate that the assets are actively used in farming, and of course, typically this is where you're going to see, like on your tax return, are you filing a Schedule F every year?
And John, sometimes what happens is that when those seniors kind of age out of being actively involved in the farming operations, and maybe the kids and grandkids are doing it, sometimes what I've seen is that the seniors are, quote, renting their land out to their children and grandchildren who are actually running the active farm operation.
Right.
And
in which
that's
case,
a problem.
Yeah, because now you've turned an active farm into just rental income. And rental income, or rental assets are going to be counted against you for Medicaid purposes. And so that can be a problem. So
one point is if you're in the farming business, make sure you're filing a Schedule F, regardless of whether your CPA or tax preparer tells you need to file one. I've had seniors who, because of their very low income on Social Security, their preparer said, well, you don't even have to file a tax return because the farm lost money. We don't really have to file anything. We've got everything depreciated out. And I say, file the Schedule F anyway.
Yeah, because that's going to be what proves it. Now, this is typically what we're talking about here are in the crisis situations. We would prefer that you avoid the crisis.
Right. If you've got a family business and you're looking forward to passing that to generation, and you've got active folks, in that business in the family, then don't wait for a crisis. Let's plan in advance to protect that asset down to your children and grandchildren.
Yeah, so for example, about it's probably been 10 or 15 years ago now, Lisa and I had recognized that this was going to be a coming problem, that particularly in our area, we would have these folks that would have these illiquid assets, large farms, mineral interests, small businesses, rental real estate, commercial real estate, things that were...
Did you say timber?
Timber.
That's a big one around here.
Things that were valuable and yet illiquid. You couldn't turn them into cash.
Yeah. 7-year-old pine trees don't do you any good.
No, they really don't. And so we actually, I know in our practice, we developed about 10 or 12 years ago, we developed a trust using some of our experience that we had gained in the tax planning world. We developed a trust that would shield those assets so that if at some point in time in the future you needed something like Medicaid benefits, then these very valuable but illiquid assets would not count towards your eligibility. And that has been for the folks that have utilized that, it has been a great tool for them.
Works like a charm.
Works like a charm. But unfortunately, that is one of those things that does have to be done well in advance.
Well in advance. But, a lot of times, folks worry about giving up control and things like that. But we can make sure that senior family member is still the boss of operations.
You can stay in control. You can continue to benefit and manage and use the assets, but this gives you a way of shielding those assets from these things. Now, it does have to be done several years in advance. And kind of like the last caller was talking about is in the government you often will see where you've got one side who really is, they're like, yeah, we're going to take. Mm-hmm. But you'll have this other side that they'll slip these little things in to at least give people a shot.
Well,
and this type of trust is this is something that has been approved by Medicaid.
Yeah.
We're not talking about anything weird or anything. This is something that's done in the Medicaid rules. But those geniuses down in Austin, Little Rock, and Washington D.C., they say, yeah, we're going to let you do this as long as it's been done at least 5 years in advance.
And that's a little frustrating too, John, because that's the folks that can take advantage of that, or the folks that seek out, the expertise to do those kind of things, and so you just have to take the step and ask and seek that out. And that's why we come on Aging Insight, to let you know that it's out there. So if you're out plowing, farming, checking cows today, you need to talk to us about how to protect all of that.
That's right, because like I said, we hate to get into those crises. Some of those situations have been very, very difficult for us. We can usually get you through a crisis, but man, it can be awfully difficult.
Yeah, and sometimes it doesn't come out quite as perfect as we would have liked it to in the first place.
No, that's exactly right. Well, listen, you're coming up on the end of another episode of Aging Insight. We appreciate you listening in. Probably should be back here next weekend.
Yeah, next weekend we'll be coming in from the Wine Festival. We'll do the radio show, and then we'll go back out to the wine festival.
That's right. So the Alzheimer's Alliance Wine Festival next Saturday.
Spring Lake Park.
Be looking for Lisa and I out there. I will probably be serving some drinks. So we'll see you out there next weekend. Till then. And that's about it for y'all. Let's see, what did Travis have to say?
Yeah, what did Travis have to say?
Had a underwriter ask one time if a bush hog was vicious. Yeah, city underwriters on farm and ranch policies. Yeah, they don't get it. Yeah, although I will say that when I got out of the Marines, I worked at a horse ranch, and I could basically live there for free as long as I did a couple of things: shoveled horse manure every day, disc the arena, and then about once a month or so I would have to go out and brush hog. Now, the tractor that we had was like a 1934 Ford tractor. and the bush hog had an open back, and so.
Oh. So don't fall backwards.
So everything, yeah. First of all, if you fell backwards, you were going to get chopped up and by your own equipment. And second, everything that thing cut, it would throw into your back because there was no guard or anything on there. And of course, this was in Central Texas, where your half of what you're cutting down is mesquite bushes with thorns about the size of your pinky. So yeah, not a lot of fun out there. Anyway, thank y'all for watching. We'll see y'all next time.